The rain had been falling over Ashbourne Hall for 3 days straight, and Duke Adrian Whitfield was tired. Tired of London, tired of meetings with lawyers about his late father's debts, and tired most of all of the empty silence that had filled his family home since his mother passed away 6 months earlier. He arrived back at the estate well past midnight, his carriage wheels splashing through puddles on the long drive. The servants had not expected him until morning, so the great house stood mostly dark, with only a few candles burning in the windows. Adrian did not mind. He preferred it this way. He could walk through his own halls without a dozen eyes watching him, without anyone offering condolences he had grown weary of hearing. He handed his coat to the single footman still awake, and waved away offers of food or tea. There was only one place he wanted to go, the library. It had been his mother's favorite room in the entire house. She had spent countless hours there, reading by the window seat, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. Since her death, Adrian found himself drawn to that room more than any other, though he could not explain why. Perhaps because it still smelled faintly of her perfume. Perhaps because her presence seemed to linger there more than anywhere else in the house. He pushed open the heavy door, expecting darkness and silence. Instead, he found a single candle burning low on the side table, and curled up in his mother's favorite chair, fast asleep, was a young woman he did not immediately recognize. Adrian stopped in the doorway, startled. For a moment he simply stared. She could not have been older than 20, with light brown hair that had come loose from its pins and fallen across her face. She wore the plain dress of a household servant, slightly too large for her thin frame. Clutched against her chest, even in sleep, was a leather-bound book. His first instinct was irritation. No servant should be sleeping in his library, especially not in his mother's chair. He took a step closer, ready to wake her with a sharp word, when his eyes fell on the book she held so tightly. He recognized the cover immediately. It was his mother's personal journal, the one she had kept for over 20 years, filled with her private thoughts, her daily reflections, the small joys and sorrows of her life. Adrian had not even known where it was kept since her passing. Seeing it now, in the hands of a sleeping stranger, sent a strange jolt through his chest, somewhere between anger and confusion. "Wake up," he said, his voice firmer than he intended. The young woman startled awake immediately, blinking in confusion before her eyes focused on him. Recognition dawned on her face, followed quickly by horror. She scrambled to her feet so fast that the book nearly fell from her hands, and she caught it against her chest as if protecting something precious. "Your Grace," she gasped, dropping into a hurried curtsy. "I am so sorry. I did not know you had returned. I will leave at once." "Wait," Adrian said, holding up a hand as she turned to flee. "What is your name?" She paused, clearly frightened. "Lily, Your Grace. Lily Hartley. I work in the kitchens." Adrian studied her for a moment. The name was unfamiliar, though that was not surprising. He rarely interacted with the kitchen staff directly. Ashbourne Hall employed dozens of servants, and he could not be expected to know each of their names. "Why are you sleeping in my library, Miss Hartley, instead of your own quarters?" he asked. "And why do you have that book?" Lily's face went pale. Her grip on the journal tightened, and for a moment, Adrian thought she might refuse to answer. Then her shoulders sagged, as though the weight of holding back a secret had finally become too much. "I should not have taken it," she said quietly. "I will return it immediately. Please, do not dismiss me. I need this position. My younger brother depends on my wages." "I have not said anything about dismissing you," Adrian replied, though his tone remained stern. "I asked you a question. Why do you have my mother's journal?" Lily hesitated, her eyes darting toward the door, as though calculating whether she could escape before answering. Finally, she let out a slow breath and met his gaze. though her hands still trembled slightly. My mother was the Duchess's lady's maid for almost 15 years, she began. Sarah Hartley. Perhaps you remember her. Adrian's expression softened slightly with recognition. He did remember Sarah Hartley, a quiet, gentle woman who had served his mother faithfully for as long as he could recall. She had always been kind to him as a child, sneaking him sweets when his mother was not looking, and humming soft tunes while she worked. I remember her, he said. She passed away, did she not? Some months before my mother. Yes, Your Grace. 4 months before. Lily's voice grew thick with emotion. My mother worked here her entire adult life. I grew up in this house, in the servants' quarters, though you likely never noticed me. Your mother used to let me sit with her in this very room while she worked, while my mother attended to her duties. She would read to me from this journal sometimes, or read other books aloud while I sat at her feet. She said I reminded her of herself as a young girl, always curious, always asking questions. Adrian felt something shift in his chest, a memory stirring faintly. He recalled now, vaguely, his mother mentioning a little girl who sat with her in the library, though he had been too young and too occupied with his own studies to pay much attention at the time. After my mother died, Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper now, the Duchess found me weeping in the hallway one evening. She did not scold me for being where I should not have been. She simply sat with me and held my hand and told me that grief takes its own time, and there is no shame in feeling it deeply. She let me come to the library whenever I needed comfort, even after my own mother was gone. This room became the only place where I still felt close to both of them. She paused, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand, clearly trying to maintain composure. When the Duchess passed as well, she went on, I did not know what to do. I had lost the 2 women who meant the most to me in the entire world, within months of each other. I began coming here at night, after my duties were finished, just to sit in this chair and remember. I found her journal in the desk drawer one evening, and I could not help myself. I began reading it, just small portions, just enough to hear her voice again in my mind. I know I should not have taken it without permission. I only wanted to feel close to her one more time. Silence settled over the library after she finished speaking. Adrian stood motionless, processing everything she had told him. He had spent the last 6 months drowning in his own grief, so absorbed in his own loss that he had never once considered that the servants in his household might be mourning too, quietly, invisibly, in the corners of the house where no one thought to look. He had lost his mother. But this young woman, barely more than a girl, had lost both her mother and the woman who had been like a second mother to her within the same year, and she had been grieving entirely alone, sneaking into empty rooms in the dead of night, because there was nowhere else for her sorrow to go. I am sorry, Adrian said finally, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier sternness. I did not know. Lily looked up at him, clearly surprised by the shift in his tone. Your Grace, you owe me no apology. I am the one who trespassed. Sit down, Miss Hartley, Adrian said, gesturing toward the chair she had just vacated. Your Grace, it is your mother's chair. I could not possibly. Sit, he repeated, though gently this time. Please. Hesitantly, Lily lowered herself back into the chair, still clutching the journal as though afraid he might take it from her. Adrian pulled a second chair closer and sat across from her, an action that seemed to startle her even further. Dukes did not typically sit across from kitchen maids in the middle of the night, discussing matters of grief and memory. Read me something, Adrian said. Lily blinked at him, uncertain she had heard correctly. Your Grace? From the journal, he clarified. Read me a passage, the one she used to read to you, perhaps when you were young. For a long moment, Lily simply stared at him, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel test. But there was nothing in his expression except quiet sincerity and an unmistakable sadness that mirrored her own. Slowly, she opened the worn leather cover and turned through the pages until she found what she was looking for. "This one," she said softly. "She read this to me often. It was written the year I was born, actually. Though it is not about me. It is about her own hopes for her children." She began to read, her voice trembling slightly at first before steadying. The passage spoke of a mother's wishes for her son, written when Adrian himself had been only a small child. His mother had written about her hopes that he would grow into a man of kindness, not merely titles and duty, that he would learn to see the people around him, truly see them, regardless of their station in life. Adrian listened in silence, his throat tightening with each word. He had never read this particular passage before. He had not even known of its existence. Hearing his mother's private hopes for him, spoken aloud in this quiet library by a young woman who had clearly loved her deeply, struck him with a force he had not expected. When Lily finished reading, she closed the journal gently and looked up at him, uncertain what to say. "She would be glad to know you remember her so fondly," Adrian said after a long pause. "Both of you, my mother and your mother." "I think of her every day," Lily admitted. "Both of them, really. The kitchens are loud and busy, and there is rarely a quiet moment to simply sit with my thoughts. This library became my refuge. I am sorry for taking it without permission." "You need not apologize again," Adrian said. "And you need not sneak in here under cover of darkness any longer." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Your Grace, this library is large enough for the both of us," he continued. "If this room brings you comfort, you are welcome to it. Not as a servant hiding from discovery, but as someone my mother clearly cared for deeply. She would not wish for you to grieve alone in the shadows." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, though this time they seemed to come from relief rather than fear. "I do not know what to say." "Say nothing," Adrian replied. "Simply come here whenever you need to. I find that I have been doing the same thing myself, more nights than I would like to admit. Perhaps it is fitting that we share the space." Over the following weeks, an unexpected routine began to form. Adrian found himself returning to the library most evenings, no longer entirely surprised to find Lily there as well, sometimes reading quietly, sometimes simply sitting with her own thoughts. At first, their conversations were brief and somewhat formal, careful exchanges between a duke and a servant, who both understood the strangeness of their situation. But grief has a way of breaking down barriers that propriety usually keeps firmly in place. Adrian learned that Lily had a sharp wit hidden beneath her shy exterior, and a genuine love for books that rivaled his own mother's. Lily, in turn, discovered that the stern duke she had always feared from a distance was, in private, thoughtful and surprisingly gentle, especially when discussing memories of his mother. He arranged for Lily to be given a small private room near the library, rather than the crowded servants' quarters she had shared with several others. He told the housekeeper it was simply a matter of practicality, given her late mother's long service to the family. But everyone in the household quietly understood there was more to the gesture than mere practicality. Lily, for her part, never abused the kindness shown to her. She continued her duties in the kitchen as diligently as ever, refusing any special treatment beyond what Adrian had already offered. But each evening, when her work was finished, she would make her way to the library, and more often than not, she would find Adrian already there, 2 cups of tea waiting on the side table. They spoke of many things during those quiet evenings. Sometimes they discussed the journal, reading passages together, and remembering the woman who had written them. Other times, they spoke of entirely different matters, books they had read, places they hoped to visit, small observations about the world that made the other laugh unexpectedly. Slowly, without either of them quite realizing when it happened, their shared grief transformed into something else entirely. A friendship neither had expected, built on mutual understanding and quiet companionship. Months passed in this manner. The estate's other servants began to notice the change in their Duke, how he seemed less burdened, less consumed by sorrow than he had been since his mother's passing. Some whispered about the kitchen maid who spent her evenings in the library with him, though none dared speak openly of it, uncertain what to make of such an unusual arrangement. One evening, nearly a year after that first encounter, Adrian returned from a long day overseeing estate matters, his mind heavy with the usual concerns of managing such a large household. He made his way to the library, as had become his habit, expecting to find Lily there, perhaps reading or working on the small embroidery project she had recently taken up. Instead, he found her asleep once again in his mother's chair, much as she had been on that first night, though everything else had changed entirely. The fear and uncertainty that had marked their first meeting were gone now, replaced by an easy familiarity that had grown between them over months of shared evenings. Adrian stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep peacefully, the journal resting closed on her lap rather than clutched defensively against her chest. The candle beside her had burned low, casting soft shadows across her face. He did not wake her this time. Instead, he crossed the room quietly and retrieved a soft blanket from the nearby settee, draping it gently over her shoulders. He extinguished the dying candle and lit a fresh one in its place, ensuring she would not wake in darkness should she stir before morning. Before leaving the room, he paused beside the chair, looking down at her sleeping form with an expression he could not quite name. The library that had once held only memories of loss had become, somehow, a place of unexpected comfort and connection. His mother's chair, once a symbol of his grief, now seemed to hold something warmer within its worn cushions. He left the room quietly, leaving Lily to her peaceful rest, knowing she would wake on her own time, in a place that had become as much her sanctuary as it had always been his. The rain outside had finally stopped, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the library windows, dawn was beginning its slow approach, carrying with it the promise of another day in a home that, for the first time in many months, no longer felt entirely empty.